Urban Renewal Authority. It's been a little while, so it's nice to see everybody again. A couple of months. Hope everybody's enjoying their summer. Tonight we've had a request to announce yourselves here to the video. So maybe we can go around and each board member announce themselves. I'm Justin Hay. I'm the chair of LIFT. And why don't we start, Gary, with you?
Gary Thompson, vice chair.
Kyle Schlachter.
Craig O'Rourke.
Jim Reese.
Corey Hoffman.
Ryan Toole.
LaDonna Jurgensen.
And tonight we have Jim Collins is absent, as well as I believe Bruce Stallman is, he shows up, he'll be here, but I believe he's absent as well this evening. So with that, our last meeting was April 9th, so it's been a couple of months, but we can go ahead and jump right into the agenda. The first item is the review and approval of the video minutes from the April 9th meeting. And as you remember in the last conversation we had, we talked about that this board will certify the video meeting minutes per our review by watching them. So if anybody has any comments or questions on the video that I know is posted, let me know, and otherwise we can go through the approval of those.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of April 9th, 2015.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any objection to the motion? Okay. Meeting minutes are approved, and the next announcements, the third item here on the agenda. Are there any recent announcements that we need to discuss or anything that's come up?
I don't have anything right now. It's not on the agenda.
All right. Moving on, public appearances. So those of you in our audience here tonight, you have 4 minutes each, and if you'd like, there looks to be an extra microphone there if you want to step up and announce yourself here at the end of the table. And 4 minutes, please. Yes? Oh, you have a mic, good. I don't know if that one's working, but you might want to, yeah, that one, I know. There we go.
Okay, I'll use it by pulling it up so I know that they can hear me at home. I'm Carol Brezak, and I have a couple of comments and would like a response back from this committee. In May, I submitted a CORA request to this group. I have yet to hear from anyone. I followed it up with a phone call with the phone number that's on the website. I have never received a call back. If there is another way to do business with this committee, I wish you would put it up on the website so those of us that want to do that can make good use of the website and the information there. So I would like some feedback on that later. It's just fine. The other thing I think is very interesting, when you go to the website, you have a picture of Breckenridge Brewery and the King Supers at Broadway and Littleton Boulevard. They have nothing to do with urban renewal except that they've been blighted and included in an urban renewal area. There's no reason for the pictures of those two projects to be on the website, and I believe it's misleading to have them there, and I would request that you remove them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
We will follow up on the CORA request. I have no knowledge of it at all. And I have the list of all the phone calls I got from CIG, who checks our website, and nothing as far as a request. So I apologize. But I will get with you after the meeting, and we'll find what you need, Carol.
Yeah, Carol, and outside of phone calls, is there I believe there's a LIFT email address?
Email address, and there's
So if that might be a second conduit, but as Jim stated, we'll look into your voicemail and call request and follow up on that, okay? And regarding the website component, I know that city and others have been looking at kind of a refresh of our website and looking back into it. So when we get back into updating imagery and making updates to the website, I made a note here, we'll make a comment there on what our imagery is covering, if it's within boundaries and if it's efficient to what we're talking about here at LIFT. So thank you. Anything else? Yes.
Carol mentioned a couple things that I wanted to mention with
You want
regard
to
to...
give us your name?
Oh, Linda Knufinke, between the Santa Fe South and Santa Fe Mid urban renewal areas. I just wanted to mention tonight that I kind of have the feeling that the Urban Renewal Authority is disconnected with the changes that the city has made to the urban renewal plans, including adding and excluding the properties. And so it just seems like, have you been informed? You know, they went in front of city council. Do you know about that? You know, your responsibility as part of the Urban Renewal Authority is to create the plans. And in my mind, the plan should be relatively static. Otherwise, you cannot administer to the plans, and the county can't administer to the plans. So if you add and subtract properties at will, it makes it kind of difficult. So then another thing is that with the urban renewal plans, you know, the law says section 3125-103 subsection 9 and 10 says the plan must include an urban renewal project. In the existing 4 plans, we don't have urban renewal projects, and it also says the plan is sufficiently complete to indicate the urban renewal area includes land acquisition, demolition, removal of structures, redevelopment improvements, and rehabilitation. And that it includes zoning changes and planning changes with land uses, maximum density, and building requirements. I could go on and on, but I just won't. So I encourage you to read that section of the urban renewal, or with the code, the Colorado State statutes. So, and if you need more information, I got plenty. So, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Anybody? Oh, back there? Yep.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Erickson. I live in District 1 in Littleton. I would like to address some items that were in the packet back in March regarding Columbine Square, which the developers have named Villages of Bellevue. There are some statements that are totally untrue that need to be brought to your attention if everything is to be transparent and honest in this executive summary statement brought in front of the newly revitalized Urban Renewal Board in Littleton. Item 8E states that the retail center lost its anchor tenants, a school and a church, and the non-anchor tenants either went out of business or left the center for another location. What you need to know is that both of these statements are untrue. I called the school. They informed me that the owner of this property did not renew anyone's leases. They were an anchor. They did not move because they wanted to relocate, because the owner chose not to renew anyone's leases. Businesses moved out sporadically since the leases were all up at different times. This made it look like everyone was vacating the property, which they were a little at a time as their leases were up, not because they chose to move somewhere else. It certainly isn't illegal to not renew someone's lease, but please don't lie about it. This property is owned by a company located in California. I'm sure they've made a hefty profit from this property for the last 25 years from the citizens that live in this area. Now that it is time to do some upgrades on the property, they are choosing to ask for help in building these apartments. They want help from Urban Renewal. Littleton needs to keep its retail. That is what makes money for the city, not more apartments. Over 1,600 apartments were approved for Littleton last year, and this is definitely not an area that is lacking in apartments. Now the main problem with what was to be this first urban renewal project, Columbine Square, which is located on the corner of Bellevue and Federal, and it is a big one, is the property was posted for a public hearing to be rezoned in front of the Littleton Planning Board from retail to apartments on September 23rd of 13. That is nearly 2 years ago. long before urban renewal was even brought up to the citizens of Littleton. We didn't hear about urban renewal until March of 2014. This property owner was ready to build apartments with his own money, with no help from the government or taxpayers, in the fall of 2013. The public hearing was canceled and rescheduled for December 9th, 2013. That public hearing was also canceled. It makes you wonder what kind of backdoor deal happened in those months. A deal by the city, by the old urban renewal chair, is what I suspect, to give the property owner our money to assist in building apartments so that a self-blighted and slummed area that has now been sitting vacant for nearly 3 years can look like a success on the books of the new Urban Renewal Authority. Why would we be foolish enough to fall for this scam? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, back here. Okay.
My name is Pam Chadbourne. I live a block and a half away from here in District 1. And I just wanted to confirm what Linda said. I believe that this group needs to read and be aware of the Colorado revised statutes regarding urban renewal. As a citizen, I think that this board can harm the city by not following the statutes. The statutes aren't that strong, and yet there are some things that are written to protect citizens and cities. And so I urge you to do what Linda suggested. I'll make the same request. Please read the CRS. Look at what's in it. I don't believe our products meet that standard, and that can harm us. It's not just that it doesn't do what the CRS requires. It can harm the future of the city. Let me also confirm or validate the issue with the website. So what irritates me is that there are only successes of urban renewal projects listed there. Well, urban renewal projects fail also. And the issue for this board is to recognize what fails and to address that, to put into practice risk mitigation processes that will help us not approve projects that will fail. So let me iterate that as well. Look at the website, maybe put in some failures, and put on the website, tell us, the citizens, what you're doing to prevent us making those mistakes that have happened in other places. And one of them is right over here on Bowles in Santa Fe. So the Dish urban renewal was not a failure. We know what the reasons are for that failure. There is nothing in this board's process that I've seen or that I've heard you talk about that would prevent us from making those same mistakes again tomorrow. So please, we've got to, it should be public, put that into effect. And the third thing, I just want to validate what Jeannie said. I independently talked to several businesses in the Columbine Square shopping center, and they told me their leases were ended. In fact, if you go online, you'll see that CMCB sued the barbecue place because, well, for a couple of things. So they wanted those guys out. They wanted to vacate the shopping center and then do something different with it. They're a $500 million proposition in 6 different Western states, and some of their funding is probably European. I don't feel as a citizen we should be helping them out with their redo. They've been there for almost 20 years. They were happy to collect leases. They didn't do any major renovation on that shopping center, only minor ones. You should redo those at least every 8 years in the business model, and so I don't want my money to go toward them. So thank you for considering all 3 of those things.
Thank you. Anybody else tonight? Okay. No? Okay, that closes our public appearances for this evening. Next item is the financial report, and we have 3 months, April through June, to discuss. Jim, would you like to walk through those with us?
I don't know if you want to go through each one individually or just kind of see the summary in June, because basically that shows you all the expenditures we've made over the last couple of months up to date. And so if you look at that one, which is item 5A.III,
Where are you getting that?
Up in the
very top
upper
of
right-hand corner. And you said, I'm sorry, Jim, which page?
5A.II, little i's.
Okay.
II.
But it's not a different one than what you sent to us a couple of days ago.
Right. So
Okay.
you've got
It doesn't
you've
have
got
that
three
on it.
sheets. You've got April 30th, you've got May 31st, and you've got June 30th.
Right.
And I was referring to the June 30th one, just to make this easier. We can go through each one of them if you'd like. But basically, this shows you what your budget is and what we've expended to date in each one of the budget line item categories. So to date, you've spent $55,519.99. We have no revenue because we have no projects bringing in any revenue at this point in time. We did, as you can see down there, have a $50,000 loan draw. But really the bottom line here is the fact that at the end of June, LIFT had $11,116 left in its checking account.
Can you tell us about the Ricker Cunningham went from nothing to 9,700 in 2 months, and what is that for? And would it be wise, if we have some huge bills, to send out a copy of those invoices or billings?
So a lot of the costs, and you'll see that with the consulting services, Ricker Cunningham one, and some of my time as well as Corey's time, went to dealing with our arbitration with Arapahoe County regarding...
And I guess I didn't realize that Ricker Cunningham was involved in that. So what was their
they had
involvement in
Go
that?
ahead, why don't you explain to them what they actually did?
They were a witness. Part of the discussion in that litigation was about the impact reports they prepared, and so Ann Ricker testified and had to prepare for her testimony as well.
So that's 9,700 is for that.
It was, and I think...
It was a good part of that. I think there may be some other costs involved there, and I'd have to go back and look, but it was mostly related to that. They had a lot of preparation to do just for the actual hearing itself.
Was there a contract that outlined those services that we can reference?
You worked, what we ended up doing is basically splitting the cost with the city on all of that. And I don't exactly know how there wasn't a specific
It was
contract.
under their general agreement for professional services.
Yeah.
Okay. They had expert witness in there as a line item, hourly.
They have an hourly rate.
Right.
They have an hourly rate that,
It was not a separate hourly rate for expert witness testimony. It was under their general hourly rate, as I recall.
okay.
Would it make sense for the board to get copies of those invoices? And I mean, I think it was Linda who made the comment that the authority is disconnected from the city, and I really think the board is disconnected from the executive director and what's going on. And I think it would be nice to have a little more information about some of those large expenditures.
Okay. I can provide those to you if you'd like.
I would.
How far back do you want to go?
Well, I don't want every invoice, but I think when we have a major expenditures, it wouldn't be unreasonable
Okay.
to see what those
And to add to that, since we've lapsed a couple of months,
Well, I assume you're looking at them and...
On me, I should definitely, in these lapsed months when we're not meeting, that information should be, better displayed to the board. I can't, do the reply all, as we've always talked about, with Corey, but, I guess the conduits of communication there, you bring up a good point over the last few months when we're not meeting, but there is, generation of fee, and there's still some things happening that, quite frankly, isn't, all that information wasn't privy over the last few months to us because we weren't meeting. So
But I'm assuming that you're reviewing all of these invoices.
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
approving them.
that's correct. I am, yeah. So I'm reviewing all the checks each month over the last 2 months, as we've not been meeting and talking with Jim about them. So I am aware of that number. I was just asking specifically about contractually if there was but that number doesn't surprise me from what we've discussed on that end. But to my point, I need to push that information on those lapsed months to you guys better. Or I don't know if it comes from me or if it comes from Jim, just from a communication standpoint.
Well, if you want to zero in like a dollar amount that you want the invoices from, I'll, bring them to every meeting if you want.
Yeah.
Well, it's public information for the most part, correct?
Yeah, I have no problem doing that. It's a lot more paper. So I'll bring them. And of course, you can tell, the invoices that we get, if you go to the, 5B with the check register, we have maybe 4 invoices a month. So I have no problem bringing all 4 invoices if you'd like to see all that much detail.
Well, I don't know. It probably makes sense if it's over $1,000. That seems
Why
reasonable
don't
to
I
me.
just bring them all? Really, it's only 4 or 5 invoices. I don't know.
Well, and I don't know that all of that has to be printed out either.
Yeah, you can just
I mean-
email it to everyone and then post it as PDF form on the website with the packet, rather than print it all.
We can do that. I can do that as
Yeah,
part of
agreed.
when I send out the agenda, I can include all that in there if you want. That make sense?
And
I
just
would
for-
appreciate it.
The only exception is to the extent that my bills have privileged information on it, because some of the information in terms of the description of the items is privileged. So I may have to work with Jim on redacting portions of it.
Well, but it's still information that can be given to the board.
To the board, yes, but not to the public.
Okay, right.
Who prepares the check register in the Excel spreadsheet? Is that,
I do that, yeah.
maybe there would be a way to have a line item just explaining in a few words more, rather than simply consulting services, a few words over $1,000 saying what it was that the consultant did for that invoice, what were their key activities, and that way it's all in one place. It's just an explanation of what the check was.
Okay.
Well, Donna, I don't know if that would be a substitute for seeing the invoice itself. Since Justin's already reviewing it and signing off on it, then there's a way to kind of condense it and convey it to the board by saying this $9,000 was for expert testimony in front of the judge for this lawsuit, and then that would kind of explain it.
And that's fine if Justin wants to take responsibility for reviewing them all, and if the board doesn't have any responsibility for approving expenditures in any way, I'm fine with just a description.
I believe your
I think-
bylaws do give
We do
Justin
have-
that authority.
Up to 5,000, wasn't it?
Yeah, we have to, I believe we did in that contract have the provision.
Yeah, I
We
think it
need
was
to
5.
revisit that. I think it is $5,000 that then triggers secretary to review and approve. Is that, we need to...
Well, I'm not
we
the
have-
secretary.
Or I'm sorry,
Remember.
but we had the provision that anything over $5,000, I'm sorry, yeah, vice chair would then approve.
And the board doesn't need to approve it?
Not the actual payment.
Do we have, okay, we can look at let's look at the bylaws and clarify that. But you bring up a good point of communication and making sure, especially over a specific dollar value, 5,000 in our bylaws, and then if we're going to say, from a $1,000 standpoint, that it's communicated via description or some sort of, outline as to what that task was, so the board can, have some more information on each task from these consultants.
Any other questions on the financial statement?
The cost of the legal matter, so what we're saying here is 1/2 of the legal fees and
Correct.
other, okay. Great.
Still a fairly significant number. So and that's what's causing our budget to get eaten up really quickly, the 2 legal actions we have.
Only one. The other one's paid entirely by Littleton.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
The ag land litigation is entirely a Littleton expense. It is not a LIFT expense.
Maybe you can explain that when we get down a little further in the agenda.
Okay. So anything on the financial statements, any other questions, or the check register, if we want to go through that in any more detail?
You have the last month's checks registered.
Yeah.
I have a question about the check register. It looks like the format changed for June.
It looks like the paper changed for you.
There was in the prior format for April and May, there was a budget comparison at the bottom of the check register indicating how much had been spent against the budget. And then in June, and I'm looking at the, not the printed version, but the one that came out
It should be the same.
by email. And it just looked to me like the check register changed and we lost that budget comparison feature.
Well, it also looked like we got the check register just for was it June? We didn't get a check register for April or May.
I believe I emailed them out, but I don't think I printed everything out.
Well, maybe, because I looked at it online. I didn't print it out either, but I thought it didn't look like we got. And why would we have a separate, do we need a separate one for each? Can't it be just a continuation?
And I have the whole list of all the expenditures through the entire year, if you want to look at that, the drawdown sheet.
I think if in the printed handout, just comparing the two that are printed, it looks like there is a comparison.
I don't know what you're looking at exactly.
The check registers from March and May have the exact same format.
And it was May and June that on the one I received online, it seemed I'd lost the comparison piece.
Well,
Account distributions, but I see that it is on there, so.
on the back.
Yeah, I think it printed.
Somehow, it just got printed, the last column is on the back, which shows you what the budget, and for those line items, what you've spent to date, just for those line items.
Yes, yeah.
And that's not, I think the actual financial statement is actually a lot clearer, because it shows you what you spent to date and where you've overrun categories or are under others.
Well, I see how it works. Thank you.
Sorry about that, I don't print, so.
It probably all fit landscape.
Yeah, we'll get our printing. We're kind of in the process of that.
I don't know what
printing
happened.
process. So we'll get it all on one sheet.
The city prints these out, and Becky has done an excellent job so far getting these printed. Tonight, they were not stapled, and parts of it were backwards, so I apologize, but I'll have to get here at 5:30 and check through.
But I agree. I think the statements you sent out are in alignment with what you've sent in the
I
past.
haven't, yeah, I just copied that spreadsheet month to month.
Yeah.
I don't change it, so.
Okay. So really, just to reiterate, we have a couple of items just back on the financial statements that we're going to outline and explain some of the task items, so we're not in the dark, and we'll relay that communication on better to the board, especially if we're going to lapse a meeting. And then, review the bylaws that we talked about over the $5,000 and make sure that that's,
Being followed.
exactly being followed up. So, any other questions on the financial statement and/or check registers? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion or objection? Okay, motion is approved.
So really, why, if Justin, if you're approving the expenditures,
Yes.
why do we need to approve the financials report?
You mean tonight?
Yeah.
You mean when we go through the process of reviewing?
What are we approving? I mean, we were relying on your approval of the invoices. So what is the board approving?
Well, I guess what we,
It's the report, the report showing you the summary and everything that's happened, so. It's pretty standard.
I mean, we can accept it,
right.
maybe.
Are you saying it's almost as if it's an after the fact?
Right, exactly. if we're just putting a rubber stamp on it, I'm saying, why are we doing that?
I don't know of any boards that don't do that type of thing, wanting to see what the financial statements are every month. It's kind of like a check and balance. I mean, yes, Justin has that authority to sign everything, but I would think the board would want to have the ability to go through it and look to see, okay, where was the money spent, and where do we stand to date?
Yes, I agree, it's good information. And I think we can accept the report, but I'm just kind of quibbling with that word approving. What are we really approving? I don't know, maybe that's a question for Corey. What responsibility are we taking by approving?
I do think you are basically approving and ratifying, if you will, that the expenditures that were signed off on by your chairman are in fact true and correct. There's two ways to do this. Certainly you can do it that way. The other way is to not pay your bills until the board approves it as a whole. And boards do it both ways, where the board approves it, and it's not until the board approves it that the chairman's authorized to sign. So you can do it either way.
Well, already we have a question of what, we obviously have at least one expenditure that's over $5,000. So did we follow our bylaws? I mean, was Gary supposed to approve that? Is the board supposed to approve it? I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, quite frankly, I agree with you. I think that there might be some premature, processes, especially as we're doing litigation, and there's things that, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not involved, on litigation side as Corey is and others, and so, if there's more of I'm more of a projectionist, trying to understand what it's going to look like for that month, and then if anything is outside of that projection in the approval processes, or as we're looking at it, I need to understand what that is and why, and that would be a point of conversation if it's outside of what was projected for, June or May or April. So if there is a process that's a little bit more upfront, I know contractually we can go back, but I think that it's in alignment with the scope of what's happening and what's been working on with the litigation process and everything else, which are a lot of hours are being put towards that. And so I think that some of those communication things we were talking about, I think will help that process, but you bring up, a valid point there with understanding what it is.
And going forward, just what you're saying, Corey can discuss this further, but the arbitration piece is over, and that's what your big expenses were. The litigation piece, which is regarding the ag land part, is going to be a city expense. So I don't believe we're going to see any more large expenses of that nature.
Okay. I apologize, I mixed that terminology of arbitration litigation, so once again, proves my...
You can get Corey to explain it.
Right,
More detail than I can, but
Right.
I just want to kind of clarify the way they divided this up. And frankly, when this was going on, it was pretty hard to project what costs we were going to have for the expert testimony. It was pretty hard to identify my time. It was pretty hard to identify Corey's time. It just was what was necessary to prepare for the hearing.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I'm just saying I'm not comfortable with approving expenditure. If that's what we're really doing, ratifying and approving expenditures without seeing any detail, or, it doesn't mean a lot to me to approve a financial statement with no documentation.
Yeah, and I agree. I think I can provide, like all the invoices, as we talked about, via email, the week before or whatever, so you can see if you have any questions, call any of us, either one of us. I prepare them all, and Justin signs them all.
Yeah, monthly. So I think that layer of communication, so everybody can review them and question them before I go through the signing process, is great. I think that works. So.
Okay.
Okay. Committee reports.
I just have a few things, just kind of bringing you up to speed on some of the things that are going on. As you're aware, the Santa Fe Urban Renewal Area project, this is the one we were just talking about, we'll be going through litigation. I'll let Corey explain a little bit more about where we are in that process, but that's basically kind of slowed things down as far as being able to pursue development in that particular urban renewal area. And as you know, we had one developer that's very interested in doing a development in that area. Also, the next thing I had on here was discussion about communications, and Carol's point was rather timely, but last board meeting, the board asked about, the emails and calls and how they were being documented and returned and that type of thing. And so I brought along tonight, this is the record of all the emails and phone calls that CIG tracks. And this goes all the way back to March, and you can kind of see the activity. There has been none since May, so there has been very little activity. So I don't know what exactly has happened as far as Carol's comment, but we'll find out. The website's had some new postings put up there, and the question was, why is Breckenridge Brewery on there, and others. I think their website is really just depicting examples of redevelopment activities, and we're taking ownership for that, and I don't believe it does take ownership for that. It just shows different types of things all around the metro area for the most part. So that people that go on our website can see what redevelopment activities are. If Littleton had some, big stories to tell as far as urban renewal projects, then we would have those on there. And hopefully we will soon.
It does also kind of connect in the fact that there were some kind of incentives in those projects, whether...
There was, yeah. It wasn't
projects, which...
from us, but it was from the city.
Right.
Yeah. Somebody asked about Facebook last time, and there have been a few new postings, but no inquiries. And the last thing I had under that was, we talked about the work session last time, and we didn't pick a date, and I think we were going to follow up on that. We're going to try to get Ann Ricker to find out when she was available, and I still haven't gotten a response from Ann as to when that might be. So not a huge surprise there, but haven't heard anything. I'll keep after her on that. The other thing, and maybe we'll talk about this later as well, and maybe under other business if we want to, I think, Corey, at our last meeting, we talked about the state statute change, and it might be good, because I know you wrote a whole memo on what that would be, and I don't know if you want to do your part of it. You want to talk a little bit about what the ramification, because the board size will change in January.
So Corey will talk about that in your report. Okay.
And it has effect on amending any current plans or any new plans that we may bring forward. There's a much, much longer process now than what we've encountered in the four we've done. And as far as development projects, I mentioned the Enzer property is on hold pending the litigation outcome over the ag land. And at least from our perspective, I don't know if the developer is pursuing any other courses of action on that property. I have not heard anything on that. And Villages of Bellevue, that is also starting to gain ground again. I spoke with the developer, and they're actually starting to rework their plans, and they'll probably will resubmit and try to go through the entitlement process soon. So not that affects us, but it will affect their timing as far as asking for urban renewal funds.
And I know with that project, they showed some interest in getting in front of us and discussing.
And they still are. It's just timing is not right yet. I mean, I think we had that discussion when we had the preliminary submittal, and the plans were the 2013 plans that were done before. And basically, I think we were all aware of the fact that those are probably not going to get approved in that from the city. So basically, I think we put it on hold and said, when you get further along in your entitlement process, then maybe that's when you should come back to us. So I think that's their intent. They still intend to come back.
Sure. Okay.
So can I ask, since we're not really reviewing bills, has your time, I know you're not spending a lot of time, I don't know, 25, 30 hours maybe a month?
A lot less
Lot less?
Last month it was a lot less than that.
Was it?
It was like,
No, it's still
I think
3,000.
it was like $455, somebody, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, in that month, it was, between the two statements we have, it's like 3,000 or something. So is your time, did you spend a lot of time also on the arbitration issue, or how are you spending your time, I guess?
Hourly, I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, I know-
of course,
I
as you're
know
aware,
that we're
my
paying-
contract expired and we went to an hourly kind of
Right,
thing.
I know we're paying you hourly. I'm just
Yeah.
kind of wondering, since nothing much is going on, what what are your activities? I mean, are you just reacting when you get a call from somebody, or did
Primarily-
you work with the arbitration?
Yeah, oh, definitely, yeah. I was very involved in that. I had to testify as well. That was several months ago. Recently, and since we haven't had any board meetings, last couple of invoices have been like $1,000, $500, mostly administrative work. Putting these reports together, putting the agenda, those kind of things, and we can talk about that a little later on as far as maybe what the city can provide, because it's not in my mind, not a cost-effective way for you guys to spend your money, but
Secretarial,
we
right.
do have a void there.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
Well, I guess I would kind of ask, saying the consulting service, CIG, that's mainly maintaining that log, and I mean, at this point, they're really not doing much, but
They put some postings on the website, that type of thing, and again, it's part of that invoice that I'll provide to
You
you.
know what, we're going to expand on exactly that and Jim's contract just down the line here, just to stick to the agenda real quick, LaDonna, and we'll
Okay.
definitely talk through those contractual things.
Well, and when I provide those invoices, like you talked about, there is an hourly breakdown of all my time as well as CIG's time, and Corey's staff time, too.
well, I think that would be good information for the board, because
Okay.
to me,
Yeah.
it seems like we're kind of really in a void, expecting us to approve things, and we don't
Yeah.
really have
Duly
information
noted.
to do it.
Definitely. That's it for the director's report. We can move on to Corey.
Certainly, I've got three things. First of all, what we refer to as the ag land litigation. That is litigation where I actually represent the city. So the city pays the bill, not this entity. And that is to determine whether the inclusion by the city of ag land in the Santa Fe Urban Renewal Plan was in accordance with the statute. And we have a disagreement with Arapahoe County on that, and there are essentially two issues. One is the percentage of area that is both urban level development within the ag land area, or the entire urban renewal area, and contiguity with what's known as urban level development, and sort of a calculation issue. And the second is we have a disagreement as to what the statute says. And so as to the second issue, the city has filed what's called a motion for summary judgment on a question of law to have the court decide the issue of law about who's right, us or the county, related to the interpretation of the statute. If the city is right, then we would go on to the second issue, which is basically the percentages. If the city's wrong, the case is over, and we would discuss with the city whether to appeal. But that's why we wanted to get the legal question teed up, so that we can sort of understand the legal issue at the front end. The trial date is September 24th, 2015. It is a one-day trial if we get to that point. We still hope to be able to decide this, I think, on briefs as opposed to actually going to trial, because I think even if we disagree, I am hopeful that we can put that disagreement on paper as opposed to actually having a trial. And so, but again, all of those expenses are city expenses with one exception, and that is that to the extent we need to call on Jim for some of his knowledge on an hourly basis, that would be a LIFT expense. So that's where that piece of litigation is. Secondly, I wanted to respond to some of the comments that were made in public comment because it relates to House Bill 1348. This idea that somehow this board is not, or the plan that was adopted by council is not in conformance with the law. I respectfully disagree, and I would suggest that that was really what was at issue in the arbitration that the city and LIFT won on, and that is the definition of the term project. The definition of the term project is undertakings and activities, plural. And if you look at the urban renewal plans, I think you will find a number of proposed undertakings and activities in the plan. So at least in my opinion, and reasonable minds can differ, these folks obviously differ, the plan is in accordance with the urban renewal law because it does articulate several potential projects, or again, undertakings and activities plural, which is the definition of the term. It's probably a good conduit to talk about House Bill 1348. And I'm going to suggest to you that as I sit here today, there are still more questions than there are answers. The governor has suggested there is going to be some sort of technical committee put together over the summer to talk about some of the what appear to be glitches in the language of the bill that was put together at the very last minute. There are concerns, I think, not only by municipalities and urban renewal authorities, but my hunch is there's concerns by the other taxing entities as well. There is a mediation process that is now embedded in the statute, and I would suggest to you that mediation is by definition non-binding. I'm not sure that's what the taxing entities intended when they tried to get that language included into House Bill 1348, to have a non-binding process. And the term project is used inartfully in the bill, and it is used in a way that is not consistent with the definition. And so that is something that's going to have to be vetted over time. And then I think the most direct issue is the effect on the size of the board, but also the timing of that. And so I would suggest to you that if you look at the effective date of House Bill 1348, it applies, it goes into effect January 1st, 2016, but it only applies to basically new plans or amendments to existing plans, and that terminology is vague as well. But that's also what's going to trigger having a board of 13, which is 10 appointed by the mayor with the consent of the governing body, and 3 from the other entities. Those 3 are a representative appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. That person can be anybody that they choose, that the board chooses to appoint. A member that is appointed by all of the special districts, and they get to choose who that person is, but that one person has to be an elected official of one of those special districts. And then the third is a representative from the school board, and that individual has to be a member of the Board of Education. So those are the other 3. But technically, they are not, it is not necessary that they be appointed until something triggers the effectiveness of House Bill 1348. In other words, an amendment. Having said that, if there is a need to do an amendment sometime after January 1st, 2016, you need to have a mechanism to have those folks available. So there's a little push and pull, if you will, in terms of how to have that happen. And while we're having that discussion because it affects you as a body directly, a lot of these issues are issues really for the city, because it is the city that appoints the board and has to work with the other taxing entities in terms of figuring out a mechanism for getting those other 3 folks onto the board. And again, while this board recommends changes to the urban renewal plan area and urban renewal plans, it is ultimately city council action that approves and amends plans. So this is an interesting discussion, but it's a discussion that is as much ultimately going to be for the city as it is for this board.
And then, as Corey pointed out, it isn't over yet, because the governor in his letter, when he actually signed the bill, opened the door again and basically said he recognized that there were some ambiguities and some changes that needed to be made, and those will be made in the 2016 legislative session. So hopefully this technical committee, whoever they actually are, can come up with some recommendations that can be supported by both the Senate and the House, and work this out. And frankly, it's really kind of confusing.
And I guess the last thing I'd say is, for what it's worth, I am not a betting man, so take this for what it's worth. But if I had a bet to make, that bet would be that there's not going to be a change, despite the governor's best intentions.
Okay, I have like a whole bunch of questions. So if the Urban Renewal Authority implements renewal projects, that is neither an amendment nor a new plan.
Correct.
So we could do a whole lot of things.
Correct.
An amendment would be if the city council decided to, I'm trying to think.
Well, if they wanted, somebody wanted to petition in or add property, that would be an amendment.
In or out?
Under the language, and there is language that I think the folks that drafted it were trying to get a broader application. My read of the statute is they didn't get there because, again, once the city council adopts the plan, there's no further action for the city council. And that's one of the disconnects in the statute. And so you're right, that unless there is something that is desired to be done by the Urban Renewal Authority that is not contemplated by the plan, that would require a plan amendment, then arguably. Now, one of the issues is there is a language in the applicability section that talks about if you change the financing. And that is an open-ended question as to what that means. And I think that's one of the technical issues because several lending institutions have gotten nervous and said, we're not going to work on urban renewal projects because under this language, arguably, you could redo our deal some point later when another deal comes in. I don't read it that way, but lenders are by definition conservative, and so they're not willing to take any risk.
And the 10 appointed by the city, mayor, city council.
The mayor.
But we're still at 7, again, until an amendment to the plan is made.
Or the city decides to increase it to 10.
Of course, they could.
They could.
Basically, of course, do that.
Okay. And that's still unclear. I mean, whether or not the amendment's what triggers it, or you got to do it, I don't know. I've heard legal opinions on both sides of that.
And I'm sorry, I think there's the legal part and the pragmatic part, and that is that you need to have those folks available because if you're starting to go through the amendment process and they're not there, you're a step behind.
Because you can't do an amendment until those people are there.
And the mechanics of it are going to be extremely difficult. I mean, in Littleton's case, it's not so bad with the school districts because we have one school district, but in several cities, they have multiple school districts that overlap, different urban renewal areas. Colorado Springs, for instance, has 8 urban renewal areas, and there are 3 school districts in that. So those 3 school districts have to get together and pick one person. But here, it can be very complicated with special districts as well. And it doesn't spell out who's responsible for actually making that selection. So somehow they all have to get together and make that decision and pick a person.
That is not Littleton's problem. It's just not.
Are the revenue sharing provisions in the bill implemented regardless of whether there's a change or an amendment or new plan? If LIFT moves forward with a project within the existing plan, are the new revenue sharing provisions applicable?
No. My read of the statute is unless there is a plan amendment, which is action by the city council, the answer is no.
So to take that a step forward, when we enter into tax sharing agreements with the developers, it should not trigger an amendment.
And I don't think that was the intent, but it goes to the definition of project. And the definition of project in the urban renewal law is very clear.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
We might need a bigger room, or maybe,
well, no, and
maybe not.
I mean, it's frustrating because it is I think everyone looks at this and says it's a frustrating piece of litigation. And whether
Legislation, you mean.
legislation, and whether you wanted to limit urban renewal or whether you want to do urban renewal, I don't think the idea was to pay the lawyers. And unfortunately, I think that's why my slip. I think that might be the result, is unfortunately there's a lot of ambiguity in the statute.
On your comment about lenders being nervous is very appropriate, especially regarding this revenue sharing, because if an urban renewal development project could potentially be unwound by legislative action or committee action or another lawsuit, the bond buyers are not going to step up to buy those bonds.
That's the concern. Now, I think there is good case law out there. There's a Colorado Supreme Court decision. But again, I'm not the one that's making the lending decision, and that's the risk.
Okay. Well, thanks for that update.
So you had three things.
It was the definition of the term project.
Okay, okay.
The way they put it in there is actually, as Corey and I always refer to it, as a development proposal is what we call a specific site plan type development. And that's kind of how the statute language was crafted. And so it is very confusing.
Okay.
Interesting.
Well, Corey, we have you in our corner to help us know what.
And there's a group of us that are working both with CML, but hopefully with others to try to resolve some of these and ideally make it a little more clear.
All right, well, thanks, Corey. Any more questions under reports? You all? Okay. Well, moving on to item number 7, unfinished business, and back again to Jim Reese's Executive Director Agreement. So if you all remember, in April, we talked a little bit about revising, amending Jim's agreement, and he did send out his adjustments. It's as mentioned, it's a hourly as needed, to kind of some of the conversation we had earlier tonight, and we did make some adjustments, and Jim put his track changes on here. If you look at Exhibit A, you might want to focus there. That's really where the adjustments were made, and if you do note the term first, if you go to item 7A in your contract there, the term is backdated just because that's the effective date of when his last contract ended and when this contract effectively begins. And really what we've talked about here, and the reason we went through the process of pushing some amendment on these contracts and looking at, basically our budgetary constraints at the moment with not having a project yet on the boards is, we want to keep things streamlined, and that's why obviously we've only had meetings based around specific items of motion and discussion as of tonight. But we've also had some more conversations with city staff, which we can get into on the next item here, talking about absorbing some of the admin and some of the day-to-day that Jim's been doing in the past that now the city is willing to absorb, and we can talk about those in more detail. But Exhibit A on Jim's contract removes, I think, 4 items from his scope of services. But again, it goes back to, a reduced kind of hourly rate until we have projects to work around. So I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at that, but they're...
I don't remember seeing a red line copy, but what are we removing? It's basically administrative services.
Sure. If you look under the Exhibit A, the first item here is under his management of approved urban renewal areas. So we've removed the tasks of construction management, services for URA construction projects, the design, contracting, inspection. I mean, that's quite a ways downhill on a specific project, and it was a little too detailed, obviously, until a project has some legs underneath it, and it's actually moving through permit and making sure that things are on point there. The second,
We would anticipate changing the contract if you did have a project, because this goes for a year.
I think this goes back to that conversation about projecting. And if we have a project that's coming in and it's gone through our application process and we project that we're going to be obtaining revenue off of that based on application fees and a timeline, I think as a board, we can adapt how many hours we're willing to spend with our budget, with Jim and other parties associated with LIFT around that. I think we need to be cognizant as a board to do that and take it through those filters upon that time frame. So
And that type of a duty usually resides with a project manager. So if we ever get to the scale of that type of thing, we may want to retain the services of a part-time project manager.
But I think that's something we always have to be there and ready for, and it's going to be related to an hourly contract, you know. So that's the first item. The second item on this Exhibit A was the operating budget oversight and review of monthly financial statements. So is that what basically you've been doing, obviously, but we're going to be putting that more in the staff in-house, correct, Jim?
You know, the conversations that I've had with city staff is that, you know, we want to move in that direction. And
Yeah.
I don't believe, and Denise is here, she can talk about some of that, but I don't think they've really fleshed all that out yet. But that certainly would be my direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the goal here is to take, you know, a good piece of these tasks and put it within the city staff so they're kind of running on it. And I think we've been working on that, you know, process and that bridge of getting them acclimated to the admin tasks that we have to have here and what they're going to do. So again, it's kind of, right now it's just housekeeping. There's not anything really to focus on right now from an hourly standpoint until we have something. So, you know, I think it's left.
In the meantime, Jim will keep
Yes.
managing the budget and preparing the financial statements until we have a definitive agreement with the city.
And I think, you know, maybe this is the next item of discussion, is to get an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement together that states exactly and outlines exactly what they will be doing. I think it'll help the city. I think it'll help this kind of gray area we're discussing of where it's, you know, who does what. So as we get operational around a project, we can, you know, have a better line between tasks and scope of work moving forward. So, so I think globally, Jim's contract is in alignment with, you know, where we're going as a group to, you know, bring a successful project in and stay at an hourly rate as needed. So.
Anything else significant we were removing? That was
Yeah,
discussed
two more
tonight?
items. The third was Jim removed the grant application preparation, represent the URA on legislative issues concerning urban renewal bills, review development plan applications within URA.
Now, the one about the legislative and the reviews and all that, I do that on my own time, so I'm not going to charge you for that. It's something that I want to do and be as part of like Corey does with CML, that type of thing.
And the only thing that I guess I thought seems kind of missing is that, and maybe it's not, but it seems like you need to be the person who's communicating with the board. And we don't really have that as kind of a specific item here. We have one, notify board members of pending URA issues between board meetings, answer questions from individual board members. And maybe that covers it, but that hasn't been happening. So I think the only communication seems to be between the chair and the executive director.
Right. So I'm not following. Other than the things we talked about from the financial statement, what other information are you not getting that you want?
Well, we're not getting any information at all. I mean, we get information, we're not having a meeting, but we don't get any information about anything that's, I mean, obviously some things are happening.
Okay, I'm not sure how I can do, other than I instituted using the directors and the attorneys report on a monthly basis to try to bring you up to speed on the activities that we've been undertaking. I don't know how else you'd want that. Would you want it in a written format, that you want more detail? I'm not following.
Okay, well, I mean, take the attorneys and or the arbitration process. When did the arbitration end? When did that process end?
February is my recollection.
Okay, and we really haven't gotten, well, I don't know, maybe we did get some information about it, but
I thought we did.
We had two meetings.
We're getting information at the meetings.
If you look at that first paragraph, and again, this kind of does speak to the financial component, but the first paragraph to the contract, states that contractor Jim shall, as part of his responsibility, specifically report to the chairman of LIFT as necessary and no less than once every week. And I mean, maybe the last couple of months aren't the best example. There just hasn't been much
Going on.
much going on. I think the prior months before that, and then obviously last year, there was quite a bit of communication going on, but currently it's, the communication's kind of a little bit doled out a little bit just based on what our activity at the time, so.
Right.
The sentence prior to that says, shall include duties that may be necessary to properly manage and administer any URA activities undertaken by LIFT. I mean,
Yeah.
I think communication would cover that.
Okay?
Do you need some more clarity? I mean,
No, that's okay.
okay. All right.
I'm just feeling a lack of communication in there.
Okay.
But that's okay.
Okay.
If it's adequately covered, and I agree, if there's nothing to communicate, there's nothing to communicate.
Right. Right.
Justin, on that section, I'd like to understand if Jim is not going to be responsible for reviewing development plan applications within the urban renewal areas, who is the primary party who would review an application on behalf of the board and help educate the board about the proposed project?
And I think this goes back to last year when we were discussing the role of LIFT, and the board at the time, and it's fairly typical, decided not to be involved with development review and then basically to turn those responsibilities over to the city and basically, and even if you look at their renewal plans, it says that we will not be reviewing development plans. So that's why I struck that.
So these are plan approvals, not applications for urban renewal support?
Correct.
Okay,
Anything that comes
misunderstood the
to this board for an application for funding, oh yeah, absolutely, I'll still continue to do that.
okay.
Like zoning issue, we're not going to.
Planning and zoning, no. We'll be in communication, of course, because we need to be, coordinating what we're funding with what the city is approving.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions on Jim's contract? So this is a resolution, which obviously, causes for motion and action on this. So if there aren't any other questions, is there a motion from the board?
I move that this contract be approved.
Second.
Okay, so a motion to adopt and approve the stated resolution tonight. All those for the adoption of the resolution, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, say nay. Okay. The resolution passes to approve and adopt the independent contract. And I don't know if we need to state do we have a resolution number on this yet? Or I didn't see one on here. But I guess we'll get one.
It's another thing we need to work on. We're not really terribly good at numbering our resolutions.
Okay, so we need to add resolution number in, obviously, to Jim's contract here.
And also that, a test secretary, that needs to come out. I don't know
Yes,
about the
the-
secretary.
Yeah, good point. The signature might be on. I think it has been reviewed. That's an older one.
Well,
Are you talking about on
did you get,
page 5?
The resolution.
no, I'm talking about the
Oh, the
resolution.
resolution, I'm sorry. I looked at the
I
contract.
think we took that out of the,
Okay.
let me check that.
Bylaws.
Yeah, out of the bylaws.
Yeah, so we can strike that and initial it. Okay. Okay, next item is, we mentioned, this is just up for discussion, city IGA, in talking about scope of services of what the board and our executive director is going to be responsible for versus what the city has began to agree to absorb into their staff. And tonight you mentioned we do have Denise Stevens from the she's the Economic Development Director for the City of Littleton. So Denise, if you could please kind of state some of the items and tasks that have been discussed, and we can leave it open for discussion tonight.
Good evening. I'm Denise Stevens. I'm the Economic Development Director. Michael had taken a look at this with you, Justin, and what our main objective is here, I think, is to try and help reduce costs overall, particularly till we get some projects going. We, again, as Jim noted, we haven't hammered out all of the details, but I think Michael is committed to finding staff members in one area or another to cover what you'd like us to help be covered. One of the things that we have taken kind of a deeper dive on is dealing with the website and possibly disengaging with CIG. So I think that would save you some money. What we're proposing is we sort of coordinate our efforts. There's a couple of things that we need to find out, and we think since you bound the contract with CIG, that maybe if you could find out from them who owns the website. The city does own the domain, so we're good with that. We have already started the process of scraping the information that's on the existing site, so that if there is any contention with CIG, at least we have that information and can rebuild. And we want to make this seamless, so we won't have it absorbed completely into our Go to Littleton site, but we want to kind of put things together so that we can manage this from an administrative standpoint. And we'll take all suggestions into account about how we can make it a more robust site and maybe more interactive, more immediately responsive. It's all just things that we're kind of investigating right now, but we do think that kind of reducing that contract or eliminating that contract with CIG would be something that we could take on fairly quickly. And then our department in particular is committed to helping with that. So.
And just briefly to talk about CIG, I believe contractually Littleton and LIFT own, any material affiliation with, databases and computer software. Sure. I just was reading item 8 on their contract. I don't know specifically outside of domain names and, other locations of where all that data exists, how that works within the contract, but it's something we can investigate and have a conversation with them as to where that is. And I know, Jim, you have the main contact there that we've been working with. And
Angela, yeah.
Yeah, Angela. I know it's changed
Yeah, well,
recently.
Matt Winter set everything up, and then Angela took over, and so we can certainly, if that's the direction of the board, pursue that.
Right. And I think that's the next item to discuss here is, again, kind of taking things, especially the website, some of the social media within the city to help us alleviate some of those costs and things there.
So just primarily, if we could find out who owns the site and who hosts the site, because the hosting is another critical piece of it.
Okay, understood.
When you talk about taking ownership over the site, are you talking about hosting it on city servers then as well? Or rebuilding the site completely?
Well, currently, what we were planning to do is combine it with our department site, Go to Littleton, and but there would still be that seamless access. People could still go to the LIFT site and get directly to the LIFT site, but that just architecturally it would sort of be an integral part of our existing site, so that what we do administratively is sort of one piece. So we're not doing two separate websites. They would still appear to be separate websites, but we would combine them so that we had one point of administration.
Okay. So to define these tasks and parameters between LIFT and Littleton, City of Littleton, like getting to an IGA, maybe there's a question better for Corey, but, what do we need to do to craft up and work with you all to craft up that scope so we kind of understand? I think it'll be helpful for you all from a staff level and Michael and everybody at the city, and then obviously for our board here to say, okay, this is great, craft it into an IGA, and then we can kind of move forward with that. How have you worked with other boards and entities that way, or Corey, is there a boilerplate we can look at?
Okay, yeah. Our department hasn't done anything like that
Okay.
before, but we're willing to, probably the easiest thing would just be for you guys to outline specific tasks that you would like us to take on, and then we'll work internally about how those land, and then we can craft an agreement from there,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Is there a historic reason why there's a separate management of the web presence? The city's, all of the city's departments are managed under the City of Littleton website. They're just different parts of the same website. Is there a reason why LIFT would not be characterized as part of the City of Littleton's website?
Good question.
Well,
I wasn't around during
I
that
mean,
formulation. so-
Legally, the authority is not part of the city of Littleton. We're a
That's
separate
what I'm
authority.
getting at. There might be little historical reasons why an urban renewal authority is not on the city's website, just a link.
But just to correct, our site, Go to Littleton, is a .com site that belongs to the Economic Development Department, and it is not part of the City of Littleton website. It's a separate site dedicated to economic development, to business promotion. It's a much more liberal site. We're not nearly as restricted as the .org or the
So
.gov
that's where
site.
we would be migrating.
Correct.
So we'd be migrating there already that is in itself still somewhat separate, if not all the way separate
Correct.
from
Correct.
the city.
Yes.
So, okay. Is there any other discussion? I mean, what we can, I think, take a stab at, and I'd be happy to do that, is kind of outline with Jim's exhibit tasks and what we're doing versus, what city's doing, and maybe present that in the next meeting to
And what we need
have a
help with,
conversation
yeah, it'd be
about.
great. Happy to put a draft together, rough up an IGA, and Corey's help,
I think there's an existing IGA that we would amend.
Okay.
That's my recollection, that there is an existing IGA.
Yeah, if we could use a boilerplate and
Well, no,
then,
there's actually an IGA today between...
Oh, is there?
That's my recollection, between the city and LIFT. And so I think it would be a matter of amending that.
an amendment and maybe an exhibit to that. That would be perfect.
Yeah, so that would just be just changing the scope, really. It could be that simple.
Yeah, Jim, and if you could send, your first pass at it, and then to the board, and we can add input prior to our August meeting, that'd be awesome.
As long as Michael and the city agree, I mean.
I do have a separate question to Denise, not with the website or CIG there. The retail recruiter that the city hired a couple months back, Retail Strategies, how is that going, and has there been any collaboration between them and our kind of operation, working together to entice retailers to come in?
Well, a specific example, the answer is yes, and a specific example is related to Columbine Square.
Okay.
And just if I can take the latitude, just so people know, when the change was proposed for Columbine Square, the first thing that we did was we set about producing information that would help them continue on with a commercial component. Staff was not very supportive of this turning into a multifamily rental development. We always encourage retaining retail and commercial, and we have quite a robust ability to do that, a lot of access to data. So our communication has been back to the developer saying, we think we can make a case for you continuing to include a commercial piece here. And so one of the things that we're working with Retail Strategies in particular is that they are reaching out to the property owner and to the real estate company to tell them that when they've been at ICSC conference, that developers have approached them that have been interested in acquiring the property or working with the Changs to do a development that would be more in line with what we'd like to see there, which would definitely include some retail. Sure. So that's the kind of thing we're doing. We're trying to get them to work with us with specific developments to keep as much retail and commercial in there as we can.
Yeah, and, to your question, if you look them up, they're great. They're a, wonderful resource of data and well-versed in commercial real estate and retail relationships, across the nation. So I'm really happy to hear that the city's really taken the initiative to contract with them and really utilize their services, so.
And the
great
thing about this particular company that differs from some other retail consulting firms is that a lot of retail consulting firms work both sides. They represent municipalities and retailers, and this particular company, Retail Strategies, only represents us. And they, in our contract, will not take on another municipality that shares a border with us, so there's no conflict there. And they have reached out to all the property owners and all the developers that are currently active in the city, and they work to recruit retailers that would benefit the city to those particular developments. So.
No, I only asked just because, it seemed like there was a disconnect between the retail recruiter and using the opportunity that LIFT provides potentially to retailers, so I wanted to
We've had that discussion.
Yeah, we have, but I was wondering where it stands now.
Conversations about, hey, let's try to market some of our urban renewal areas and show that urban renewal is a tool.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I think just tonight, for the fact that Denise is here, and, we're, taking some cross-pollination from them and us is a great step forward in that, and to start to, the realities of urban renewal and relationships with potential retailers and developers is exactly what we need to be kind of striving for. So I think it's a good step forward, even, you guys taking some of the scope and helping us out from a staff level and some of these other things are a great step forward.
If any of you are interested in communications directly with our representatives at this company, I can provide their contact information to all of you. So,
okay.
And they welcome that. They again want that cross-pollination as well. So.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, we'll go through that process, and then I think in the next meeting we'll revisit a list and an IGA and go from there.
Okay. Great.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for coming.
All right, new business. We're moving right along. That's great. First item is the loan draw request, and this will be the third request from the city of Littleton. And, we all kind of looked at our the financials here earlier and saw where we were at, looking forward and projecting into the next few months as we get towards the tail end of the year here. Jim, did you want to talk to this a little bit more as it pertains to budget and where we're going in the next few months?
Well, again, we projected that we would have at least two development projects this year. Neither one has happened, and as we talked about earlier, the litigation for one thing may be holding it up slightly, and depending on the results of that, may or may not be an active urban renewal development, not project. So that one's kind of up in the air. The other one, of course, is Villages at Bellevue, and we know where they're at, and they're redoing their development plan. And so I think we're going to see that yet this year, but it's just moving a little slower than we originally anticipated. So I think as far as our revenue side, it's obviously not come in. Still hope to see that. And again, the idea of having a loan with the city was that would get us over the hump to the point where we started bringing in some revenue. And so if we had two decent development projects, I believe your cash flow works. But as it stands right now, it obviously doesn't. So that's where we stand to date on that. And we've had some expenditures this year that we didn't anticipate. We really didn't anticipate having to have quite the discord with Arapahoe County that we've had, and that's been very costly.
Okay. I think, and LaDonna, just to bring you up to speed, we're on new business item number 1, the resolution to bring a loan draw request to the city of Littleton for $50,000, and we're talking about, projecting and where we're at financially and moving forward. I think that, budgetary and projecting our next, 3 to 6 months with $50,000 and not having a project, again, speaks to why I want to streamline and have that conversation this budget, so we're not, getting overextended, and we don't need to, go too far on
And
the limit.
as far as, the extraordinary expenses, I believe we're past that now. As far as, the legal fees that were, and the expert testimony fees and all that type of thing. So I believe, as you've seen in the last couple of months, our expenses have gone way down. And I don't anticipate that they'll actually go up that much until we see an actual development proposal that we can review, which will basically increase my time and increase Corey's time as far as negotiating a contract with them. So at this point in time, we're down to the kind of the bare bones here with 11,000. But I think, the 50, if we get this another loan draw from the city, we'll be able to use that for quite some time.
Who would bear the financial burden of potential litigation regarding House Bill 1348?
Well, I'll let Corey, we're not anticipating
Not
any.
in the next 3 months, but just...
Hypothetically, if there was litigation, first of all, I don't think it would be in Littleton. But if it were, I think it would likely be the city, because I think it would be someone challenging city action. That's the action. That's the entity that takes action under the urban renewal law related to plans.
Okay. Any questions to the loan draw?
Well, I'd like a little more clarity on our probable monthly expenditures. As we talked about, your time is really minimal during a slow period like this where there is not a project and there's not arbitration going on. So I guess as you characterized it, your invoices have been $500 to $1,000 the last few months. Is there something else in here that we're obligated to that is a significant monthly expenditure that is more like a fixed cost that we can project that $50,000 that we're drawing will run out by a certain period of time? Or is it
It's extremely difficult to tell at this point, because again, it's all dependent upon what projects are coming in the door and how much time we spend on them. We just discussed CIG's contract, and we had estimated that was going to be on the neighborhood of $1,000, $1,200 a month. I believe it's in your budget. And that's gone down as well. I mean, their last couple of invoices have been down, and of course, if we follow through with what we just discussed with Denise, then that'll be non-existent, so there'll be some savings. But month to month, our invoices fluctuate. It's really hard to say how much legal time we're going to need or how much of my time we're going to need.
But everything going forward, the larger expenditures going forward, as far as we can tell now, are going to be related to potential developments.
It is, yeah. If you look at your budget, that's really where the expenditures would lie. Is if my time were to increase, you have a line item in here for $36,000. Okay, so that's $3,000 a month, which we're not obviously spending at this point. But if we had an actual project, we probably would. And again, we're going to be, collecting fees from the developers to offset those costs.
Right.
And Corey's time would be high in the very beginning of any negotiation of a contract, but once that contract and cooperation agreement with the city are in place, then those costs wouldn't be so significant either.
Are you trying to get at how long the $11,000 will last us?
Or the 11 plus the 50. I'm trying to get a little better mental picture of how close to the edge we are really operating.
Yeah,
It
understood.
sounds to me like we've got some pretty good run room, but we have to be very careful about how we engage potential developers. We don't want to spend a lot of time on projects that would be hard to determine whether we'd really be interested or not.
Well, and we built that in there as far as a pre-development agreement. So once you approve an application and you're ready to make a deal as far as the project, we're going to require the developers to give us an escrow up front. And it could be, we've talked about the amount of about $20,000 that would go into an escrow account that we would use to cover our expenses out of. So we're going to make the developer put skin in the game early.
Right? Okay.
So it seems to me that if there were no such projects at all coming along, that the 11,000 plus the 50,000 would last to infinity.
Really, there's a couple of years of
Well, we're not totally free.
Well, let's remember that our $200,000, which we, have already had two draws, so we're $100,000 in, another $50K on this one, and that was, the $200,000 was a draw through 2019, if I can remember correctly, December 2019. So we need to, we need to get the projects and get those going, which I'm motivated and confident we're going to get them in, but just looking at some of these last budgetary numbers, and legal, hopefully going more to city budgetary numbers, we were at this last month around, $7,000, or, give or take. Before that, it was, 9,000, 10,000, and so on and so forth. So if we, Jim's in the 500, to 1,000 range, and CIG, we can have a conversation. If that doesn't need to be there, it was around, $250, $300 this last month just for management. We could start really kind of, like you said, our $61,000, we're going to have to, I want to keep that as a run that we can really pay attention to over the next 12 months outside of a project coming in.
Well, realistically, if a project doesn't come in and we don't have any revenue, we're going to be down the river anyway.
That's right. That's right.
There's not going to be any reason for us to be around.
That's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. Stay positive and eyes forward.
That's right.
We'll get there. So I understand the $50,000 and the burn rate that we've been going at, but I think, this conversation of conservative movement moving forward in our financials is, as a board, hopefully where we're really always focused on, so. Okay. Any other questions, you guys, tonight? All right, well, this is a resolution that we need to put to vote, so if we have a motion tonight on this resolution.
I move that we approve the third long draw resolution.
I second.
Okay. Is there any discussion to the motion?
Just wanted to add one thing, if I could, to explain that the condition went, and we do have an IGA with the city regarding the loan approach. We do have to show how we have spent the money, and obviously we can do that. I have all the invoices and everything, and I'll provide that to the city prior to them, council approving it.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, we have a motion and a second. So a motion to adopt and approve the stated resolution. All those for the resolution, please raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, resolution passes. The next item here is our CIG contract, which we've been discussing a little bit throughout the night. And I think, I'll make this blanket statement, and you guys kind of take it as it is, but I think we need to understand the website and the data before we, take any action to that contract at this time, and kind of evaluate that a little bit more, have some communication with them as to where we're at. But it sounds like the direction is that we can, really get some assistance from the city to take on our website and social media. So maybe what we do is, table that until we understand that a little bit more, their contract and any details behind that.
Was CIG selected through a competitive process? Were there other firms that proposed and CIG was selected for quality or price?
It's a good question. I wasn't involved when they were brought on.
And I don't think either Corey or I were here at the time when that happened, but I believe they were under contract to the city. So the city had vetted them and selected them on through their process. Afterwards, the LIFT wanted to continue using them through the entire, when we were doing all the open houses and all that type of thing. So it was a matter of convenience, but did we actually do our own selection process? No.
All right. That makes it even more practical to consider a change, I think.
Yeah, and that brings up another point. Is LIFT required in our bylaws? And we need to revisit that too. Do we need to do an RFP or contractual competitive bid process because we're not city? No. Okay. So we can evaluate based on.
There are RFP requirements for development proposals in certain circumstances, but not for that.
But not for specific contracts such as that. Okay. You guys have any more questions on the CIG contract? And I think we'll revisit that after we get some more information. And where we want to go.
And
I do
we can
have a question
sorry, go
kind of related to the CIG contract. You know, the log came around, and there is a phone call from Carol on there, May 15th or something. And here is what it says, it's a phone number, only left a name and number, no message. May 5th, 2015. But I'm noticing there was also no response. And I would think, and there's several items on here with no, this is set up as a date, time, name, phone, message, callback. But there are other items that have no response. And I am just wondering why that is and why we're not. Well, some of them here, somebody who wanted a call from Jim Taylor.
I was going to say, I do address every one of those, so I think I have responded, unless they were specific to, like, Jim Taylor or something else that somebody else handled.
So are you the one who's filling in the response?
If you look at that, most of those have my name next to them, yes.
Okay.
But CIG does take a stab at it. If there is something there that's just a basic question about, urban renewal information or when a board meeting is or that type, they will return that call.
Okay, and I'm not seeing an indication that they're returning calls here.
Like I said,
I don't know.
there haven't been many since the plans were approved. We got quite a few actually, when we were doing the actual plan development process. But since the plans have been approved, we've had very few.
So like here's one, the response is Matt working on a written response. Do they just respond on their own, or
Right.
does that come back to
Correct.
you? No?
No.
Well, it seems like we maybe need to look at what they are doing.
Right?
It also refers to emails, and there's no log of emails and what the
Right.
response
Well,
is.
this is a
to
good
those.
example of, will this task fall under city staff going forward from a phone call standpoint? Or will we, will it, if CIG's taking it on in the future, what will Jim's involvement be on that?
Well, and if Jim is, if Jim's responding to 95% of them, maybe.
And I do get calls outside. My name and phone number are on our website, so I get direct calls. I get developers that call me, are interested in some information, I provide it to them, and hopefully some of that will pan out.
Yeah, and let's add that to our list of what we want to do from LIFT board to city staff, and who should be accountable for that.
I think it's a good point, though, that this is a vehicle for gathering input from stakeholders in the community, and this is email and phone calls, and on the website there should be another space for leaving commentary, but at some place, probably not at a consultant's hourly rate, but maybe staff in the cities, someone should try to aggregate those comments. So if there's a trend amongst a certain area, we, the board, ought to understand what it is people are particularly concerned about, so we can address it.
Agreed.
Good idea.
Agreed. I think we should address that in our scope list and what that looks like, whether it's a contract item.
Comments.
Yeah, right.
And I would say, like, from this phone log, there's not very many comments. There are questions. Along with something specific.
And the phone conversations that I have when I return them obviously are longer than those 2 sentences that are there, but giving you a summary.
Anything else under new business? Okay, moving on. Other? I love this category.
I have one other, because while I'm sitting here, I did pull up the bylaws. So I want to read to you from Article 2, Officers and Personnel, Section 2, Chairman. The chairman shall preside at all meetings of the authority except as otherwise authorized by a resolution of the authority. The chairman shall have the authority to sign contracts, deeds, approve contracts for goods, equipment, supplies, or expenditures not to exceed $25,000. Expenditures in excess of $25,000 must be approved by the authority. So you were well within your authority signing that.
So we followed the rules. That's a good thing.
Although we didn't remember the rules.
Well, and it used to be, it was 5,000. I believe we changed it as part of this last review.
That's awesome. Thank you for pulling that up. Appreciate it.
All right, good.
Okay. Anything else under other, guys?
That's all I have.
Okay? No? Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
When's the next meeting?
August 13th. We'll be here.
Sorry I was late, Elsie.